Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of all ages, we are adults who have convened to talk about cool stuff. This is an ATACS deep dive on Doom Eternal. We're recording this July the 8th, 2020. I am your host, Paul from Atlanta. Joining me is Mr. Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hello, Flex. How are you?
I am great. I'm trying to fix video things on the fly. This is fun.
Yeah, you're doing
first time doing this live show.
Yeah, it's a new experience for all of us. So we appreciate your patience.
I got it set now. In the first 3 seconds of this will be a little weird on video, but that's okay.
That's totally okay. And also joining us is Mr. Nate from Clayton, North Carolina. How are you doing, Nate?
Hello. Definitely doing important tech stuff over here too that is integral to the podcast.
Totally integral.
I'm important.
You're important. You know what? We're all important, Nate, and that's really the message for 2020. Is we're all important. And just so everyone knows, we're going to be talking specifics about Doom Eternal. We're going to be talking a whole lot of things for gameplay and stories. So this is your spoiler warning. If you are totally taken by the storyline of Doom and you do not wish to have that story spoiled, this is probably not the thing that you need to watch and or listen to. So we're gonna jump into this. I played Doom Eternal on release day, so I was ready for this one. I don't know about you guys, but I was very excited when this game was announced and when it came out. So that was one of my few day one purchases and day one plays.
Yeah, I was pretty. I mean, I think all three of us played the 2016 Doom reboot and liked it a lot. So I was definitely looking forward to this, and especially after I think it was E3 last year. There was one of the E3s where like everyone just came out talking up Doom Eternal, being like, oh, they've added all these new systems and it's, they've really elevated the gameplay and all this. And so like that just got me, I already liked Doom 2016 a lot. Everyone was talking great about Doom Eternal coming out of E3 one year. And so I was ready to go. I don't think I played it day one, but it wasn't that long after. I jumped in pretty quick.
That's a lot of hype. There really was a lot of hype around this one.
Yeah, which is the opposite of Doom 2016, which had like negative hype.
It had negative hype, you're right, and then it was a surprise.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'm not quite sure exactly where I want to start with this one. I think probably the reason why most people come to Doom is not necessarily for the story. This Doom had a lot of story in it in the form of codex entries, but they throw you into the thick of things almost immediately, which they did in the 2016 version as well. This one felt like it got off to an incredibly fast start, even compared to the first game. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, like narratively, it was weird. It felt like this was Doom 3, and I forgot to play Doom 2 because it just started going with things, and I'm like, oh wait, am I supposed to know who this character is? Am I supposed to wait? What is Doom guy doing? Like, what is up with this? And like, it felt like there was a whole missing chapter in there.
Yeah, there was almost like you skipped over some important story there. Like, where did the space castle come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very odd because Doom 2016, you jumped right into it from the start, but they did, I think, a really good job within the first 5 to 10 minutes. Like you in Doom 2016, it's one of my favorite intros ever. But like you get out of that stone sarcophagus or whatever, and you walk out. Presumably you're naked. You find your armor, you put it on, then you get on that monitor, and right then you at least know that demons are invading.
Yeah, demonic invasion
in progress, the iconic line. That's happening, and I think you also learned from that something about they were siphoning energy or something like that. But by the time you leave,
quickly, you
have like one little encounter, and then you go up this elevator, and I think you get Hayden talking to you. And by the time I got out of that elevator, which is like 5 to 10 minutes into the game, you pretty much knew what had happened. You knew humans were tampering with siphoning energy from hell. Things went bad. Now the demons came through the hell portal, and you got to kill them. And that was kind of it.
Like, everything you just said is like the most metal thing ever. Humans were tampering with hell energy, so demons came from the hell portal. And, let's just take a moment to understand and recognize that not only is that crazy, But what's even crazier is your Doom guy in that 2016 game's like, cool, narrative. I'm going to punch the monitor. Demonic invasion in progress. I'm going to go shoot those dudes.
Yep.
And this one, it like you said, Flex, it was almost like, I feel like I missed something. Like there was like it started in a way that was fast, but it also felt a little jarring.
Yeah, I think it tried to start in a similar fashion to the first game, but they just couldn't pull that off again, where they kind of thrust you into the middle of bad things happening. In this case, the bad things happening being Earth being consumed by demons, right? But they just don't really make it as clear as quickly what's going on and why. And I would say by the end of the game, I'm still not really clear on why anything happens in Doom Eternal.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah, this game, like the first game, I thought did a really good job of having like a silly, like it was kind of a goofy premise and kind of campy, but they also executed it really well in a way that was fun and coherent. Whereas I feel like this game, they try and take it a little more seriously. They try and have, I think, a similar arc, but A, they try and take it way more seriously, and B, there's actually a lot of complicated lore. Like if you start trying to poke around the codex, there's like all these ancient races and like, you know, hell species and like all these different factions with goals and, you know, mythical characters that have importance and like all of this stuff. And it gets really complicated. And I got like, by feeling like I missed a chapter when it started, I never really even felt like I caught up with that. So even by the end of the game, like Nate said, I didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah, and I completely ignored the codex for this entire game because I just had that feeling of this from the start of being like, this is already more than I necessarily want to engage with, and I'm just gonna run through the game and see what happens. And you still get kind of a vague idea of what some of the factions are and what their histories are and like where Doom Guy came from, kind of stuff. But it's all really muddy and vague and not clear at all.
And this is one of the things that I'd like to offer as my first real criticism of the game is that the 2016 Doom didn't take itself. It took itself just seriously enough. I feel like that this game not only does it try to take itself too seriously narratively, like I actually tried to keep up with the codex entries. I spent time on every level making sure that even if I didn't collect every single collectible because maybe some of the platforming was too difficult for me for my patience level or whatever, I got every single codex entry. And about halfway through the game, I just couldn't keep up anymore. And the importance that they were placing on that felt a little bit out of character for what I was expecting from this game. And maybe part of that issue was my expectations weren't jiving with the creator's visions, and that could be a me thing, right? But I was expecting like here's heavy metal and rip and tear, but then what I got was here's a whole lot of really complicated backstory and factions and this and that, and I'm like, I just wanted to shoot stuff without a whole lot of this. Like where's that guy that punched the monitor when the dude started talking? Like that's what I was really looking for. Yeah, and I didn't feel like I got that here.
He was, I think he was there. He was just drowned out by everything else. This game feels like there was like a writer or two on Doom 2016 that was like told to keep it in check because like they were trying to make this specific theme, and then like someone let took the leash off for this game. They're like, all right, here I can write, I can really go nuts with the lore and like.
This is what happens when Kojima does not have an editor. Like that's kind of what this felt like a little bit. Was it like you said, someone did not have an editor, and they just, even though it didn't affect the actual gameplay, I'm a narrative driven guy, and just the narrative for this one, in some ways, even though it was way more detailed and like to almost a ridiculous degree, it was still somehow less effective than those first 10 minutes of Doom 2016, which gives you a whole lot of narrative sort of vision and a whole lot of stuff, but it doesn't round out the rest of the game. And that's what I feel like a lot of this was.
I mean, so many sequels and things that expand on a very constrained work of fiction have this issue, right? Is that, well, now what do? We expand it out and we explain more of the backstory and we we make a bigger scope and have more characters and more factions, and that often has the effect we're talking about right now, which is just making it feel flat and hard to comprehend, and not like it follows the same sort of trajectory of the previous work.
Yeah, and it's also like video games are tricky as well with narrative, because like I mean, I love a good narrative in a game as much as anyone, but it's, you also have to, I think, honor, like it has to jive with the flow and gameplay systems as well, and it has to fit in what they're doing. And I mean, Doom has always been a very fast-paced shooter, and it's, if you're gonna wrap in all this lore, like it's you need to fit that in with the pacing of the shooting, and I don't feel like they quite did that. And like, we kind of joke about Doom 2016 being a very silly and campy kind of story, but I actually really enjoyed that story, and I thought it worked perfectly for the game, and I thought that game's story and the way it was executed made me like that game better than if it hadn't had that story. And that, like, that's when I feel like a story's at its best, is when it's enhancing the game. And I feel like for Doom Eternal, it did not. It made it, anytime a cutscene or whatever rolled around, I'm just like you meet, at some point you meet this guy at like this camp or whatever, and like the Doomslayer is like talking to him as if he knows him, and I'm like, dude, who is this guy? Like,
was that like the Betrayer?
Yeah, the Betrayer. I was trying to remember his name. Yeah.
He's got some pieces of armor that look like the Praetor armor that Doom guy wears, and he's called the Betrayer. And I'm like, seems like there might be an interesting story here, but they don't tell you what it is.
Oh, no, that story's there, bro.
It's in the codex, right?
You just gotta read the codex, because actually, leading up to that encounter, all the pieces of the codex that you find are literally his entries. And it's funny you bring that up, because that's where I really started to fall off of trying to keep up with that codex. Was, holy crap, like there's this whole story here, and the game itself doesn't tell it. And I really, again, maybe this is more me, but I don't like a story that's told through codex entries. Codex entries should let me sort of dig deeper into the lore or dig deeper into the world, not tell the story through collectibles. And that's what I feel like there was a lot here for this release of Doom, was them telling us a very complex story, but not in front of the player's face. It was in the codex itself, and that, I thought that was a little frustrating personally.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think I got like all the hints of what the grand story are just from the cutscenes, but just none of the detail whatsoever, and that ends up just feeling kind of empty for the most part, and throwaway.
That's where I think it detracts from the game. Is it made me as the player feel like I knew less than the character I was playing. And usually I feel like a lot of good stories are actually reverse, where the player kind of knows more than the character, or at least as much. And I'm playing this character that's way more competent in what's going on than I am. So like it just feels weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, like, you hit the nail on the head. It's most enjoyable when the player themselves either knows just as much or maybe a bit more than the character that they're playing. And this one definitely was, here's Doom guy, and boy, he knows a lot of stuff. And if you read all the codex entries, you could know all those things as well. And it's like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'd rather just read a book, because that's probably better.
But there was just no version of this game where I was gonna read all those codex.
No.
I'm sorry, I like Doom, but I'm not reading.
Yeah, sorry. I want to shoot things. I don't want to sit here and scroll through text.
Yeah.
So like moving away from the story a little bit, we've already mentioned the gameplay, which is fast, right? I mean, that's kind of what you would expect to get. And I'm kind of curious to you guys' opinions. Flex and I talked about a little bit of this whenever I first started playing the game. Doom 2016 did a really, really good job of layering the systems on top of each other, and you would learn every encounter a new thing that you could do. I felt like in this game, they threw every single thing at me in the first 3 encounters, and the encounters are staged such that it's almost like a puzzle game. There's an optimum path and an optimum set of things to do in order to end each fight with the maximum amount of health and ammo and stuff. And I had a really, really difficult time riding that learning curve, even on the easier difficulty. So, I kind of throw it to you guys. Like, did you experience any similar difficulties, or am I just terrible at video games?
I mean, those aren't mutually exclusive, Paul.
Damn it, you're right.
I would say that I had trouble with some very strange difficulty spikes throughout the whole game, but not necessarily a huge struggle with the very intro of the game. It was like probably 3 missions in when I started to feel just overburdened by all the things the game was doing and adding on. And I was just like, okay, this is getting to be where I'm holding so many things in my brain at every second that I can't keep up all the time, which is a learning curve. And I eventually got comfortable with most of those systems and had a good time with the majority of the encounters throughout the game, but they still had these really bizarre difficulty spikes just every now and then that were just incredibly frustrating. And I'm sure we'll get to specifics on this, but some enemy designs that I just hate. But yeah, that was kind of my experience.
Yeah, the way they overloaded the systems, I felt like Doom 2016 had some of the systems. It had the glory kills to get some health back. It had the chainsaw to get ammo. It had some of that stuff. And in this game, it probably at least triples those kind of mechanics. And I remember watching an interview with the creative lead before the game came out, and he was talking about how Doom 2016, there's actually a lot of videos online you can go watch of people playing it on the highest difficulty and basically just walking through encounters and not playing it how you think Doom should be played. And it was something with the enemy AI and the movement patterns, and there was something that was kind of exploitable in the game, as if you played it kind of what you would think of badly, it actually wasn't any harder. And they were like, okay, well, and their response to seeing that was like, okay, well, we feel like we kind of made a bad combat system there, so we want to really force players to have to engage with it a certain way, and they can't just bumble their way through, if that makes sense. So if you're playing on a higher difficulty, you can't bumble your way through. And I feel like they took it maybe to an extreme where they added so many systems onto it that you kind of, like Paul said, it's kind of like a puzzle game. You have to hit those markers. It's you have to hit your timings. You have to get your armor back at the right time. You have to chainsaw to get your ammo back because you have low ammo. And it's you have to, get your health back and hit this enemy's weak point to create this opening. And it's you have to hit all these checkboxes and what feels fairly constrictive a lot of the times, at least to me. Yeah. And it's I feel like the difficult fights I had, which maybe this contributes to kind of some of the spikes Nate was talking about, is if a fight just happens to have a sequence that's just a really tight timing, then it's it's not really that big of a change in terms of what you're fighting, but that little extra you got to hit this one extra beat in there can just make hitting those timings and completing that sequence of events that much more challenging. And the game's pretty punishing if you miss something.
Yeah. Or they put an enemy in your way that only has one solution that takes a significant amount of time and focus to do, then that just makes it so that you can't do any of the other things you're supposed to be focusing on.
And I feel like that whenever they market this game, and whenever I think back to my personal experience playing 2016's Doom, there was that whole rip and tear, I'm going to go in here and just murder these dudes. Whereas in this game, it was kind of interesting. Every encounter, once I finished the encounter, which we can talk about the level design here in a little bit, the encounters are very the doors close, here's 3 waves, go. Almost every time I finished the encounter, I didn't leave feeling satisfied. What I left feeling was, man, I really messed up this thing or that thing. And on the whole, it wouldn't be enough to matter. Like, I'm still gonna be able to finish the level. I finished the encounter. I didn't completely screw my chances of succeeding at the next encounter. But the way that they set up all of these systems and the way that they set up the timings, like Flex is talking about, I never left an encounter feeling really good about myself, except for maybe a couple where I'm like, dude, I used the flamethrower and the grenade right when I needed to. I used this ammunition type on this guy. I totally annihilated that dude's weak points. Like, they made it so hard to achieve a perfect encounter that it really kind of messed with me in a way that I wasn't happy with, because every time I got done, I'm like, shit, I'm playing on easy, and I was a dumbass for half of that encounter. What the hell am I doing? And that just doesn't make you feel good when that's like more than half the encounters in the game. You feel like, shit, I forgot to flamethrower that entire time. I missed out on 75 pieces of armor because I was just a moron.
Yeah,
And
they like you. There is a clear, perfect way to play encounters, like, because they've puzzled it together so well. I guess just to clarify something you're saying, is like you get out of those encounters and you can look back and you be like the way they design these counters, like you can see the perfect way to play it. Like, it's there. There's a very clear through line, and it's just hard to hit it.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's me being a little harsh on myself, but marketing the game as you being this badass, but then every time I finish a combat encounter, I feel like a moron. Like that just really it soured my enjoyment for a bit before I was just like, you know what, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't need to do every encounter perfectly. And I was holding myself to a bit of an unreasonable expectation, but it did really hurt my enjoyment of the game for a while there.
Yeah, I could totally see how that could happen on any difficulty, because I think the game's probably pretty punishing no matter what, because of those tight timings and all the systems you're supposed to be remembering. I definitely had the experience. I had that experience that you're talking about, some where I just came out of an encounter feeling crappy. It probably wasn't as much. One thing that I think I gained from not playing this game right at launch is that I heard all of this criticism from you guys about the systems. And so when I started the game, I was like, all right, I got to remember all my cooldowns. I got to make sure you use all my abilities, every encounter, as much as I possibly can. And that's how I was literally saying, it was like a StarCraft mantra in my head, the probes and pylons, right? Like, you just gotta just gotta keep it in your head.
Flamethrowers and grenades.
Keep flamethrowing, keep grenading, keep chainsawing every chance you get, and you'll make it through just fine. And that worked for me most of the game. There were just those points where, it's a lot to remember.
Puke on them hives, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually jotted down, so like all the things you have to keep in your mind while you're in combat, right? So you have your health and armor.
Right.
You just have to not run out or you die. You have 4 types of ammo, and that's not including any of the special weapons.
Right.
You have a chainsaw, which has a partially cooldown timer and partially only pickups.
I'm going to admit
confusing.
that it took me about a third of the game to realize how that system worked.
Yep.
I'm the same way, and that's a big criticism. Like, that's a big criticism from me. They did not explain that clearly enough, and I think that made me really struggle with some of the early parts of the game, because I didn't realize the chainsaw was a renewable resource.
Yes,
so
the first tick of it recharges on its own.
Because
the rest of it you need ticks for.
Because it has
doesn't tell you
ticks
that.
like Doom 2016 did, and you find fuel canisters around. So I'm like, oh, this is just like Doom 2016, but it's not.
Right.
But you need to be using that first tick that recharges on a timer. You need to be using that all the time to get ammo, or you're going to run out of ammo.
Right.
You need to be using your flame belch, which is another cooldown ability to get armor. You need to be using your frag grenades to clear out mobs or stagger big guys. You have an ice grenade, which I never used.
I actually use that more than the frag grenade.
You have a blood punch, which recharges every time you get a glory kill. You have dashes, which are a timed cooldown. You have 7 different standard weapons, each with 2 different swappable mods that give you different alt fires. and then you have all the major enemies have specific weak points that need a specific weapon to use against.
Mhm.
So it's just like when they throw 20 different types of demons at you in one encounter, and you're managing all this stuff, it's so overwhelming. Now, when you do hit it, and you are managing all your cooldowns, and you are dashing around and getting those glory kills, and using your blood punch, and flame belching, and chainsawing, and
hitting the
frag
weak
grenading
points.
things, and hitting the weak points, and switching your weapons around to manage your ammo, it feels really cool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it's
I mean,
a lot.
that's when you feel like that badass demon slaying hero, but the you know,
Yes.
the how much you have to execute to get there is a lot.
And so, listeners, if you're exhausted by Nate's explanation of all those systems,
There's
like
gonna be a quiz at the end of this video.
Just
I mean,
just remember that we
tiring.
haven't talked about the progression systems yet.
we're right. And I think that's a whole other friggin' thing that you need almost like a book, you know. And I guess, you know, hitting at my core criticism of this game, you know, not to jump to the end of the podcast, but like my core criticism of this is that it's really hard to feel cool. And I just wanted to come into this game and just feel real cool. You know, I wanted to chainsaw dudes and punch dudes and glory kill, but the bar for doing all of these things perfectly is so high. And then, yeah, sure, you can get through the encounter, but you don't have that feeling. Like 2016 Doom was really good at giving you these spots where they would just make you feel like, boy, I am really doing a great job. Doom 2020 doesn't give you as many of those, like, hey man, just go have a good time. Here's these 5 dudes, and you know, we just threw 20 dudes at you, but here's 5 for you to just take out your aggression on. You can just use one weapon the whole time. And that's where I was getting, especially by the end of the game, I was getting frustrated. Like, can you just give me an easy thing to boost my self confidence? You know,
And I don't even think it's so much about being easy. I think it's, at least for me, it was more about just how overloaded the systems were. And part of this is a personal preference in that I tend to like games with simpler mechanics that get a lot of mileage out of them. Like if you go back to Super Mario Brothers, like you run and you jump and you maybe get a fire flower. Like there's really not a whole lot Mario can do in that game, but they get a lot of mileage out of level design and progression, like the way it ramps up and enemy encounter design and all that stuff. And I think Doom 2016 did a really good job of having a core focused set of mechanics that worked very well. They still had a progression of enemies that ratcheted up over the course of the game. You got more weapons, and they could, you know, by the end of the game, you had very complex encounters where you had all your weapons available, all of the enemy types would rotate in and out of the counters. So like it still had a good ramp there, but the core combat loop was actually remained pretty simple throughout the entire game, and without having, you know, they didn't have enemy weak points, so you could kind of use any weapon on any enemy. They didn't have the flamethrower. They might have had a grenade. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
I don't. If they did,
I could be wrong. I don't remember really.
Ammo limits were a lot higher, so you didn't have to chainsaw as often. It was like, you know, they didn't have quite so much layers, so it was really focused on moving fast. And getting glory, staying close to enemies to get glory kills to refill health. Like it was really built around the glory kills. That was the
core loop of that game, was shoot enemies with whatever your weapon you have ammo for, get the glory kill, and then keep moving at all times. I would say the one strategy that I used the most across this game was running around the combat arena to find like a loop that I could run that was relatively easy to run and safe. So I could just run that loop and keep an eye on where the enemies are and what enemy types were around, and just like wait for the right moment to just dump all my crap on them.
Right.
And like target one enemy at a time that way, and then just run until my cooldowns recharged, because a lot of the abilities in this game are timed cooldowns.
Right. And so number one, there was a frag grenade in Doom 2016. I don't remember using it very often, but it existed. And so you guys refresh my memory. I don't remember running loops in the 2016 Doom the way that you just described, Nate, for
Not
this.
the same, no.
Yeah, I did run loops, but it was not the same. I remember 2016 Doom feeling like I had to always be on the move or I would get hit a lot, which people have proven since is false, but like that's kind of,
I felt, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what the game's going for. And so I remember running around the arena, but it wasn't like a prescribed loop. It was I just stayed on the run and kind of reacted on the fly to what enemies were near me.
Yeah.
Whereas kind of what Nate's saying is like you had to really find a safe route in these encounters. And I also had to like, you probably did this while you were running your loops, Nate. I feel like I had these like peaks and valleys in fights where like I would be like, all right, I'm peaking. This is my dump all my ammo into the big threatening enemies phase. All right, now I need to retreat and calm down, and I need to go hunt the little grunts to replenish my ammo and replenish my health and replenish my armor. And like, I need to actively avoid the scary monsters, and need to actively hunt the weak ones to
go find a group of fodder enemies, chainsaw one, flame belt to the rest, and then keep moving.
And I don't know, like there's something about that loop, that kind of gets into the level design where there's a whole lot of verticality, right? I mean, there's a whole lot of jumps. There's a whole lot of swingy doodles.
Yeah. The encounter rooms in this game are hilarious if you actually sit back and look at them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like they're completely hilarious. So one of the things that I think I liked a lot about Doom 2016 is that it felt to me like a game that I hold near and dear to my heart, which was Unreal Tournament. Right? That was the shooter that I played growing up, which was super fast paced. Here's a level, you're running around. But there's not necessarily a right or wrong way, to play that shooter when you're doing the multiplayer. And Doom 2016 recaptured a little bit of that for me with the, hey, here's a bunch of enemies, but if you have twitch reflexes, you can circle strafe and you can shoot and you can do all these like old school things, comparatively old school, I guess. You can get through those encounter rooms. Whereas in this one, it kind of took the emphasis off of that and it made it more about, all right, not only are these systems, but we're designing these encounter rooms so that you have to run this circuit. And when you're running the circuit, it felt a little more like something like Hexen. Where you do have to constantly move, but it's less about the twitch sort of, mouse and keyboard old school shooter, and it's more about it's more strategic, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that because I played Doom 2016 first, and I made those connections way back to my PC childhood, that actually gave me a disservice for this game because I was trying to apply those gameplay principles, and it does not work as well. You can still make it work. I mean, hell, I finished the game, but I could feel like they don't want me to do this. Like all these cooldowns are expired, and there's a lot of dudes still there, and you can't dodge all that.
Yeah.
Okay, well just run in a counterclockwise motion and use all the platforms until your cooldowns come back, and then you're good. And that was something that it probably took me until a quarter of the way through the game, maybe a third, before I was like, oh, that's what they want me to do. That's totally different than what I was doing. Boy, no wonder I felt like a moron for all these encounters,
Yeah, every time I tried to just get out in the open and like mix it up with enemies and like try to nimbly move through packs of enemies or get in between guys or like corral them for an area of effect kind of a thing, it was just like, nope, you're too out in the open, you're dead.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the way that I thought the game wanted me to play, because that's the way I played 2016, for better or for worse, and it worked there. And I'm like, oh no, I just do this, and it's like, wow, this is terrible.
Yeah, I think to some degree they intentionally designed Doom Eternal to not allow people to play it the way they played Doom 2016, because that was totally my experience. As I started playing Doom Eternal like 2016, and it just doesn't work. But I think they needed to have a reasonable introduction for the game, like, and gameplay ramp in those first 2 or 3 levels to teach you how to play the way they wanted you to play, since they did want you to play a very specific way. And I don't think they did that. And my least favorite part of this game was the first 2 or 3 levels, because it was, okay, how am I supposed to play this? They don't really kind of teach you that in any way, either explicitly or even implicitly. They just kind of throw you in there, and you're kind of just left to figure it out on your own. And they're introducing so many systems so fast, like we've all said. And it really took me 3 or 4 missions to really kind of wrap my head around how they wanted you to play. Mm-hmm. And like that was a rough opening. Like there definitely 2 or 3 missions in, I'm like, I don't really know how much I'm enjoying this.
And Nate, I know that you want to jump in here, but I think that deserves some emphasis on something that Flex just said. Not only are the systems thrown at you very quickly, but the level design in and of itself is also a system to learn, and they don't do a good job of onboarding you onto that. Like there's a whole lot of things that they want you to do with ammunition and guns and chainsaws and flame belches and all the other stuff that we've already talked about. But there's also a very specific way that they want you to sort of, well, maybe not specific, but like there is a way that they want you to handle the combat encounters. Mm-hmm. And the arenas that they give you, once you realize what they want you to do, it's like, okay, jump here, run here, dash here. But they don't really go through the pains to, even if not outright explain, they don't go through the steps of like, hey, we're going to introduce one swingy rod. Jump on the swingy rod, see what happens. It's just more like, hey, here's boosts and rods, jumps, and it's like, wow, this is a whole lot to figure out real quick.
Yep.
Yeah, and even if they, because Nate listed all of the systems earlier, and it's like, even if they had, they kind of did introduce them one at a time, but they didn't let any of them sit long enough to really internalize it. And B, I think there's also something to be said, especially in a game that's this fast and this twitchy and timing based. The human brain can only keep up with so many things at a time, and it's like, I just can't remember the 7 buttons I have to hit at once. Like it's just a lot to think about in these split-second decision-making things, and that's a really rough hurdle to get over. Because some of the systems individually I like the idea of weak points on enemies. I think that's kind of a neat idea. But when you're in an encounter that has 5 different enemy types, each with different weak points, and you have all the other cooldowns you have to manage, and you're worrying about ammo, and you're worrying about armor, and you're worrying about health, and you're worrying about your grenade cooldown, it's just all of a sudden, the coolness of the weak point idea gets it's just another thing in the shuffle.
Yep.
Right. And I guess, it's a weird comparison, but just follow me through this. Like, when you're playing something like World of Warcraft, the timers themselves, if you can manage those timers, that makes you a really good player, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you can, put on your dots and do your heals and then take your potion. Like if you are good at juggling timers, and you're also good at not standing in the fire, let's be honest, you will be a good World of Warcraft player.
Right.
And just Doom gives you all of those timers to manage, plus all of this other stuff, which by the end of the game, I would consider myself competent at managing that. Not great, but competent, right? And my issue is that it gives you all of those timers, and then all of this stuff with the design, and then all the stuff with the weak points, and all the varying enemy types. very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, and it's all layered on top of a very fast-paced
Exactly.
shooter that requires accuracy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's just a few steps too far.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, it's a shooter, not an MMO.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
the
one
difference.
of. As you were talking, Paul, I had two thoughts. The first was I don't think that's a bad comparison. And about 10, 15 minutes ago, I was almost made a joke of I need my custom MMO style overlay to remind me what cooldowns to hit.
Yes, really, like that. Like that would legit be helpful in a very that sad sense, but also a very like, holy crap! If I could install some add-ons to make like sounds and dings and like visual cues.
Like if I had something that said, hey, your grenade is off cooldown, dummy, use it. Like, that would be helpful. Mm-hmm. But, it's another thing to remember. But the other point, which I was thinking as Paul was talking and Nate just said, is this is not an MMO. And in an MMO, kind of what the gameplay is managing cooldowns. You're not worrying. It's not a Twitch action game where you have to be very precise with your movements and you have to be very accurate with everything you do. You're really just hitting the button for the cooldown, and if everything's kind of auto-targeted, and you don't have to worry about dodging incoming projectiles and stuff like that. Like, there's a reason a lot of shooters have fairly focused set of mechanics. It's because so much of your mental energy is focused on your positioning and how fast you're moving and dodging things, and like you have to be really on point with that in a shooter, especially one as fast-paced as Doom. That layering all that other stuff on top of it, it's really dissonant design, and it's getting you to think about two sets of things at once that kind of don't gel very well, in my mind at least.
Yeah, and that's why I think, like you were saying, the enemy weak points is a cool system, and it gels well with the idea of Doom of being very accurate in your shots, right? So you want to use the right weapon against the right enemy and be very accurate while you're dodging things, and I think the enemy weak points fits well in that. Yeah. But I personally just don't think any of the cooldown abilities made the game like a lot more fun for me. Yeah. Because I ended up just running those loops waiting for things to come off cooldown. It just didn't feel like it was a benefit. Like, yes, I want something to refill my ammo and something to refill my armor and an area of effect attack. Those are fine to have, but making them very powerful but then locked behind cooldowns just didn't feel like it worked for me with what the core gameplay of Doom is.
Yeah, and I really do feel like, like a lot of this comes off as like me being overly critical, and I don't want anyone to walk away from this, thinking that like, wow, why did that dude spend all that time playing a video game he hated? Like, it's not about that. It's just that, the experience that the game gave me was so different than what I was expecting walking into it, that it really did take a while for me to sort of rejigger my expectations. And once I had those rejiggered, like, I had a lot of, fun times, in the middle of the game. Because the encounter design, okay, all right, I got that down. We're in combat arenas. We're going to run in a counterclockwise motion. And I'm going to throw grenades at you. And, hey, these little guys keep spawning. I got a chainsaw. It regenerates. I'm coming for you. Like you kind of get all of that down, right? And then, Nate, you've kind of talked about difficulty spikes. The bosses in this game, they become regular enemies, right? That's something that I was not expecting. And when that first happened, I was like, Jesus Christ, this thing was so hard by itself.
Specifically for me, it was the floating guy with the shield. Like
the Doom Hunter.
Yeah. The Doom Hunter.
That was actually, for me, was a pretty challenging / frustrating boss when it was first introduced as a boss. And then, like, 2 stages later or whatever it is, when it pops in as a regular enemy, you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, we can talk about the Doom Hunter and the Marauder are just the worst enemy designs ever.
Because both of them require so much focus and attention because they have very specific ways to kill them. And
Very
it kind of
specific.
fits into what we've been saying about how all the systems interlock in such specific ways, and they're like an even more extreme distillation of that, of like you really have, like the Marauder, you have to engage with him directly in the very specific way he fights, and it's hard to do that on top of managing all the other enemies, the weak points and all your cooldowns and all this other stuff. It's like, well, it's just it's an extra.
So I think this is a fairly large conversation that I think that we definitely like and I'm being totally serious. I feel like a lot of this game is this exact conversation around those bosses, that enemy design, and how that fits in with the encounter design, the level design, everything that we've been building to. But before we get into that, I want to take a quick break. I need to refill some water, and I also need to lose some water because human beings are incredibly annoying. So we're going to do that. We're going to take a quick break, and then as soon as we come back, I am going to relentlessly bitch about several things later in the game while Flex and Nate tell me all of the reasons why I am both wrong and a bad video gamer. So we're going to take a break, get back with that, and we'll see where the rest of this conversation goes. So give us 1 minute, and we'll see you right after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thank you for bearing with us through our intermission. So we've talked about several things with Doom Eternal, and the conversation was leading us towards something that I feel like is going to spur quite a lot of conversation, and that is the design of a couple of those bosses that we've talked about, the Doom Slayer and the Marauder.
Doom Hunter.
Doom Hunter, sorry.
You are the Doom Slayer.
I am the Doom Slayer, not really, but I am the Doom Slayer. So, you know, if you haven't played this game yet, number one, why are you watching us? We already told you there's spoilers. Number two, so you know, Flex kind of hit on this a bit earlier. The Doom Hunter has a rocket sled and shields. And it does like it really does legitimately require a lot of focused attention on that one enemy in order to combat it properly, for lack of a better phrase. So whenever it shows up in like a regular encounter where here's 25 other dudes across 3 waves, or 50 dudes across 3 waves, and by the way, here's 2 of them. That was a difficulty spike that not only was I not prepared for as a player, but I handled very poorly as a person. Like, I was like, who did this, and where are their homes? Like, this is not okay. So how did you guys handle it the first time that it was like, oh, hey, remember that guy that was real hard? Here's him, plus a whole lot of other people to pay attention to. Yeah. And here's all your cooldowns. Go.
Yeah, I can't decide whether I hate the Doom Hunter or the Marauder more, but I definitely really strongly dislike every time either of them show up in a battle.
And I kind of dislike them for the same reasons.
Yeah. The Doom Hunter is terrible because you have to use a plasma weapon to knock down the shield.
Yep.
And so if you run out of ammo, because the shield has a lot of health,
and you have very limited ammo in this game.
And you have very limited ammo. So if you run out of ammo with a plasma weapon before you take down a shield, then a shield will recharge, and then you have to go chainsaw somebody to get ammo back and then start over. But also then if you knock down his shield and get blocked by somebody or end up having to run away to get health or anything, then he's going to put his shield back up again before you really do enough damage to him. So it just ends up taking forever to kill these guys unless you do it perfectly.
That first boss fight with the first Doom Hunter you fight, was possibly one of my longest fights in this entire game. It was an epic struggle of me like not understanding at first how I had to tackle the fight. So like kind of fighting him a little bit, and like you said, it just keeps regenerating its shields. So like it was this constant back and forth of like, oh, I'm out of ammo, I'm at low on health, I'm low on armor. Like, all right, let me go scrounge for those resources against the fodder enemies. Let me come back, try it again. I'm still not making progress. And like you can pump a lot of ammo into that thing over time and get nowhere. And the very first time I fought him, that's exactly what happened. And it was I never really got in fear of dying because you keep replenishing off the fodder enemies, but the fight just took forever.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way that I felt. Like whenever I beat that very first one, I finally got his friggin' rocket sled out of here and his stupid shields, and he was dead. Like that was one of the moments of achievement that made me feel real good. That I thought that this game could have had more of those. And it's difficult for me to describe to you just the crushing realization that I did nothing. Then when another one of those popped up in a freaking regular encounter, it's like you took my glory of murdering this guy who took forever, and now he's just here with these dudes teleporting in with no cutscene at all. I'm like, holy crap! So in some ways, it actually retconned my feeling of achievement. Like the game was like, all right, yeah, cool, bud, you killed that one. Here's this one, and then a whole lot more. And I'm just like, I don't know how, but you found a way to take away my positive feelings. Like,
And I feel like both the Doom Hunter and the Marauder, who we'll probably get to in a second, were pretty okay designs for a boss fight, in that it forces you to play a little bit differently, to think about the enemy and what they're doing, and figure it out, and then execute on it, and then you win. It is the situation when they just start showing up randomly, or when two of them show up at once, where it's just like, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, because as we've said before, like they require such a specific way to fight that you kind of have to fight them without distraction to be effective.
Yes.
And
which works in a boss fight, but not in the chaos of a normal fight.
Exactly.
Right. And so we've been talking around the Marauder. Like, let's just go ahead and jump into that. Like, here is a guy who has a shield that makes him invulnerable to your weapons, that you are punished if you miss time because it spawns an ad, to use more MMO language. Like, it spawns another enemy for you to have to deal with if you're not precise in your timing. And from the standpoint of a boss fight, I thought the Marauder was annoying. It actually took me more than a minute and a couple of lives, honestly, to really figure out, okay, here is a set of things I can do to win this fight, right? That there was some strategy there. But then to backtrack and actually, I don't want to say too much because I got a really funny story for the next Marauder that you face. But like, to have that Marauder show up, it didn't feel good. Like it felt a little. I mean, cheap is the word that comes to mind, but that also feels too harsh. Am I being too harsh by saying that it felt cheap for the next one to come up, or do you guys feel similarly?
No, I feel like every time the Marauder came up, I was just like, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. Like, you didn't need to do this. This fight was fine.
Yeah. Like, the Marauder is almost, I think, and a lot of people have been upset about the Marauder. We're not alone in this. Like, that was, even before I encountered my first Marauder, I had seen a lot of internet reaction to the Marauder, not liking the Marauder. But the Marauder does kind of epitomize everything we've been saying about how there's just too much in an action shooter like this. There's too many systems and too many things to focus on. And the Marauder, of all the enemies, requires the most, in my experience, he requires the most precise
Yes.
Movement's the most precise shooting. He requires you to be at your game as an action shooter. So then
Right.
when you're also having to think about, oh, what's my health like, what's my ammo like, what are all my cooldowns like, when you're also thinking about all those things, every time I fought the Marauder, it felt hard for me, if not impossible, to fully focus on just dodging his attacks and shooting him when he gave me the opening. Just the core action shooter parts. It felt almost impossible to focus on those to the degree I needed to take down the Marauder. And like that was just always a frustrating experience. You're getting distracted by so many other things.
Right. And so this is where my gameplay experience, I guarantee, diverged quite a bit from the two of you. I got so first I got frustrated, right? And then I'm like, well, okay, obviously I have to be missing something, like because whenever I'm not able to progress in the game, I feel like, okay, well, other people are progressing in this game. Let me just go to YouTube or go to GameFAQs or just like go to Reddit. It's like somewhere, and it's like, okay, guys, what am I missing? There has to be something I'm missing, right? And it's just like, nah, man, this is just real hard. And I got so frustrated at this one scene when the Marauder busts through a door as part of the first regular encounter. I got so frustrated, I literally went and installed Cheat Engine. And I said, I am not going to deal with this. Like in my mind, and again, I play video games for fun, and I'm sure that a lot of people out here would be like, "Ah, man, what the hell are you doing?" I installed Cheat Engine, and I literally used the command prompt to delete every encounter a Marauder was in from the time that he showed up as a regular encounter until the end of the game, because I felt so strongly that the developers were morons that I said, I will not engage your system, sir. I will
That's
fight.
hilarious.
That
I
is
will
very
fight.
funny.
I will fight the Doom Hunters. Like literally every other encounter where there was anything that resembled a regular encounter, even with the Doom Hunters, I would bash my head against those until I was able to figure out what loop it was that allowed me to get through that encounter. But like me personally, I felt so strongly about that Marauder should only be a boss fight that every single time one showed up, I said, no, all right, stop, command prompt, kill all bad guys. And then I'd wait for the next wave to spawn, because that's the way the command worked. And if a Marauder spawned, I would use it again, and I would use it again. And there was somewhere near the end of the freaking game when you're in heaven in space or whatever it is. And like there were like 2 Marauders that would spawn in like 3 consecutive waves. And I'm just like, nope, okay, God mode, but also just kill all enemies, kill all enemies, kill all enemies. I'm not going to deal with this. And I would have totally bounced off of the game at that point if it weren't for me being able to cheat. Because that's where I got to with how frustrating. Because like the Marauder is a great boss, right? It's a thing you really focus in on.
Yeah.
But when you add him in there with those regular guys, especially 2 of them, I'm sorry, like someone went overboard, and I'm not going to put up with that. I'm a PC gamer. I'm deleting that enemy from the game.
that very first that is really hilarious. The Cheat Engine, by the way, that very first Marauder fight that was kind of a boss fight. I actually really liked that fight, and like,
I kind of enjoyed that fight.
Yeah, and
yes.
I got done with that fight, and I was like, oh, I don't see what everyone's complaining about. That was actually kind of neat. But what we've all been saying is once they throw the Marauder in as just a regular guy, then it all goes downhill.
Yeah, the thing that constantly baffled me about the Marauder is that when you get the combat tip for it, it's like, oh, if you stand too close, he'll shoot you with a shotgun. If you stand too far, he'll shoot you with a laser. You got to stand a medium distance away from him to get him to lunge at you, which gives you the green-eyed prompt to shoot him to interrupt him. Mm-hmm. And like, I could never figure out exactly what that medium distance was well enough to do it without just planting my feet and being like, okay, I'm at the right distance. What are you going to do? Which is the worst thing to do in a Doom game, is to plant your feet and just stand there and wait for something to happen. and it never felt good. I constantly messed up the spacing because I couldn't tell exactly what was close and what was medium and what was long range from him, and it was always really bad a feeling for me.
Yeah, that's the other really dissonant part about the Marauder is I believe the Marauder is the only enemy in the game where you have to wait for an opening. You can't create your own opening.
Right.
Like I think every other enemy you can just attack. You might have to hit a weak spot. You might have to do something specific to do it, but you don't have to wait for them to do something. And the Marauder, you have to wait for the green eyes. Otherwise, he's invincible. And he'll only do the green eyes if you're at the medium distance. And I feel like I found that, mythical medium distance. Like I kind of had a sense for where it was as the game went on and as I fought them more. Mm-hmm. But it's not a necessarily intuitive thing. And you're right that it's funny, if you sit still, the Marauder kind of finds the medium distance for you. Like he'll actually kind of maneuver into that distance so he can try and attack you with the lunge.
Yeah, the most effective thing I found was to try to sit still, but if there's anything else around, you're just going to get killed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so like that's the actual piece where I just kind of lost my shit with this game. Was all right, you want me to achieve a distance, but the trash mobs that you spawn into every encounter in the Doom 2016, they were the little weenie guys who you just never had to worry about. Like, yeah, they're there, whatever. You just punch them, they go away. In this game, those little guys that they just spawn in basically for ammo drops when your chainsaw recharges, those guys hurt a lot when they hit you.
Yeah, if they hit you, it will kill you.
Right. So like, I that's where I sort of like rebelled, and I said, you cannot give me an enemy that is requiring me to do A through F, and you put it in a combat encounter to where even if I kill everything else and leave that Marauder by himself, you give me such a small encounter room, because and this was where I lost my shit. They gave me such a small encounter room, and those little guys keep spawning, so you can keep getting ammo drops from your chainsaw, where I literally could not, with my skill level as a 33-year-old man, figure out how to handle this. And so I'm just like, okay, well, because I'm an American, obviously these people are wrong and I'm right, so I'm going to delete that enemy from the game. And the only reason why I even went through that level of effort was because I legitimately thought this is a bad encounter. I'm just going to bypass this encounter. We're going to move on. We're going to play the game. It's going to be fine. And then they did it again and again. And I got so bad that they did it multiple times that I went, all right, fine. Every time I see a red shield, I'm killing all the enemies via the command prompt. And while that is hilariously American of me, do you really think I felt good about that anytime I did it? No. At that point, I'm playing the game out of spite. And do you think I'm getting any enjoyment out of that? Also, no. Like, it wasn't fun, but I didn't know what else to do other than just close the game and not finish it. And by that point, I wanted to finish it because I was that invested in it.
Yeah, a little side annoyance I had in the game is those little fodder enemies that endlessly spawn because you need ammo. They also have the side effect of like clogging up the arena.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So like,
yes,
I regularly would be like running from a bigger threat and basically just get stuck running into the little fodder enemies because they're kind of everywhere. So it's like they have to put them in there because you always need ammo, so they have to infinispawn, but then they just make it really hard to run around the arena, which also you're supposed to always be doing.
Right.
And I found that kind of frustrating because like at the start of the game, I had this mentality of Doom 20, similar to Doom 2016, of like, oh, if I clear out this enemy, it's just gone. And you can kind of like systematically work through enemies, but you can't do that in this game. There's always going to be fodder guys continuously spawning.
Yeah.
So my favorite, to get back to the Marauder, not my favorite, my least favorite Marauder encounter might actually segue into something that I know Nate didn't like about this game. is they put a marauder encounter in one of those timed bonus encounters.
Oh yeah.
And I played the game on what is it called, ultraviolence, whatever the like hard difficulty is. I played on that difficulty the majority of the game. Every now and then when I got frustrated by something, I would turn it down to easy, and usually it was for those timed bonus encounters because I thought those were terrible design. So for this, which we can talk about after this is going to be our segue, but for that marauder one specifically, I turned it down to easy for that encounter. And on easy, you don't really take as much damage, so like you can be a little more careless with taking hits. And so I would, you have just a couple of minutes or whatever, like a minute or two on this time thing, and I would turn it on easy. I would ignore the fodder enemies. I would really just focus in on the marauder, and like, I'm taking hits, so like I'm not dying because I'm on easy. But I still, even on easy, had a hard time actually killing the marauder in the time allowed. And like it just,
it's crazy.
It really drove home like just how specific and tricky it is to nail the marauder fights.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. And if we want to talk about those time fights, I mean, I think like you said, that's a pretty good segue. I mean, I didn't really enjoy any of those. No. Like I definitely did multiple of them, right? Like, I mean, that's just, hey man, there's this thing in the game. Let's go try it. But I have a difficult time remembering a lot of enjoyment out of doing those. They felt more challenging than what I wanted them to be, but also more frustrating. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't necessarily challenge. It was frustration. It's like, no, I can totally do this. Can I just have like 10 more seconds? Like, I don't need a lot here. It's like you tuned it just a little bit too much in that one direction.
Yeah, they came in two varieties for me. They were either ones that I just did the first try without any problem, or the ones that I had to try like 10 times because I just couldn't do it fast enough. And it wasn't because I was dying in the fights. It was just, I hadn't figured out the exact pattern they wanted me to follow to get the timing right.
Right.
Yeah, they felt like, to me, puzzle kind of encounters, and they wanted you to like really make use of the weak points and using the weapons most effective against certain enemies, and like that's how you would get through them quicker and sneak in under the time limit. But my problem with that is, like, to me, the fix for these challenge room, or the timed challenge rooms, I forget what they're actually called, is to do what they did for the Slayer Gates, which is warp you to a different zone, and win or lose, you warp back out with whatever ammo and health you had before the encounter. Because
yes,
like they got it so right with the Slayer Gates, and the Slayer Gates are some of the best content in the game. But then for these timed encounters, by not warping you to a separate thing, if you fail the timed encounter, you've like lost a lot of health and ammo, and then you just go right back into the world, and you're like, I didn't complete anything, and here I've lost everything.
Yeah. I ended up doing the stupid thing a lot where I would start the challenge, fail it, and then start it again and just run around like chainsawing and flame belching and glory killing the
just do a resource run,
and then run away from the big guys until the timer ran out, just so I could get my health and ammo back.
Yeah, I did that all the time, and it's the worst.
And so like I even did something that is a little more than that. It's like I would start it, I'd run around, look at it, and just sort of like, I mean, and honestly, there were a couple of them I would just literally stand there. I'd be like, all right, that guy's there, that guy's there, that guy's there, so I'm going to do this, do that. And like, I might die while I'm just looking at the screen. Then I would quick load. Like, I would save scum. Like, and I didn't enjoy that, right? Like, what I want to do is I want to run up to one of these time challenges, and then it's like, okay, this is going to be difficult. I know that. But I'm going to hit this button, and I'm going to go through this, and maybe it takes me a couple of attempts. But again, you already have the system that they put in place to warp you to a different area and go through the mini combat encounter. And then they introduce something that is just strictly worse. And that's where I'm like, okay, what's happening here, folks? Like why did you get it so so right on one side, so wrong on the other? Like, I shouldn't have to quick save
Yeah,
and
it's
then
very
hit a
weird.
button and then quick load and then make my attempt. Like, that makes me avoid your game design. And you shouldn't make me want to avoid your game design. Like, you should give me a free run once,
And
you know?
and I think those timed encounters, like as if they had leaned into them as more puzzly encounters, like I think if they were like separate rooms, like the Slayer gates were, I think they actually could have been really fun challenges because
Yeah.
they were kind of the one thing of the game that really played in on kind of the enemy weakness and like mobility stuff in a very specific puzzly way. And like I mean, I would even vouch for when they load you into that room, they load you with a limited set of weapons and ammo that's particular to that fight, and you have to
Right.
puzzle through it that way.
Yeah, make it a real
100%.
puzzle. You got a rocket launcher and the shotgun. Figure
Right.
it out.
Right.
Yes, like that is such a good idea. But instead, what they've done is they've made it almost a penalty. Like, you go through this and if you don't succeed, or even if you do succeed, right, you can still come out so bad on the other side with health and ammo and armor that you're going to make your next encounter, just the regular level encounter, just ridiculously difficult. And I don't appreciate anything gameplay wise that's supposed to be like extra, because let's be honest, like, they were extra. You didn't have to do them to progress through the game.
They were beneficial to do for all the upgrades, which we haven't talked about, but yeah, they were optional content.
It felt a little too punishing for me.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
So
I wonder,
Go ahead.
part of me wonders if, like, the only reason I could think for them doing it that way instead of a cordoned off Slayer Gate type room is if they had, because there's a mode in the game that's basically a quote unquote Iron Man or whatever. What was it called in Diablo when
hardcore.
hardcore? Yeah, there's basically a hardcore mode where if you die once, your entire run is ended.
Right.
So like I wonder if they thought about that at all when designing it that way, because like then if you fail it, it's not just that you failed it. Like if you fail it by time running out, not by dying, it's not just that you failed it, it's that you also now have less ammo. And like I wonder if that's like something they were considering for that mode, because there's another thing that's kind of in a similar camp, the extra lives,
yeah,
which feel very odd. And the only way that mechanic makes sense to me is thinking about the hardcore mode, because like those are the only freebies you ever get in the hardcore mode. Like that's the only way you can die and squeak through. So like part of me kind of wonders if there's for some of those mechanics, if they were thinking about hardcore mode, but I that's purely speculation, but that's kind of the only way they make sense to me is the way they're
I
designed.
could, I could see that. That makes some sense. I don't like it, but
No, I don't like it either. And I also think if they were designed for hardcore, I feel like they should have tweaked it to behave differently whether you're playing hardcore or not, because like if I'm right and those things were designed with hardcore in mind, then it makes it a worse experience for the people who don't play hardcore, which is the vast majority of your players, and you're like that's I don't know, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
the extra lives also really weirded me out and made my experience bad. Even though they don't really matter, it still just made me feel bad anytime I used one.
And like we've been sort of saying this over and over again. Why does this game make me feel bad all the time?
Yeah,
You know, like, I didn't do the combat encounter exactly right. I didn't do this exactly the way they wanted me to. I have extra lives, but somehow anytime the extra life gets triggered, I feel like I just did something wrong. Like,
Yeah.
this
the
game
extra
is
lives only ever feel bad. They never feel good.
never feel good. And like, and I guess maybe, at least for me, that's the crux of a lot of this is there's a whole lot of things that make me feel bad, and there's not a lot of things that make me feel good unless I thread a needle that is, I mean, kind of unrealistic for me personally to thread, which makes me think that, hey, maybe Doom's just not the game for me. Because I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who were like, nah, man, I just did this, that, and the other, and I just burned everything. And it's like, well, that's cool. I didn't. And then I just felt bad the whole time. So,
And there are things, like, we've been almost entirely negative on this game in the hour plus we've been going. There are things that are good about it, but I think the things that are good about it are just like, oh, it feels good to run and jump and shoot the shotgun. Like it does.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like that still feels really good.
And before we even move on from encounter design, I do want to say, like, well, we talked a lot of crap about the Baron of Hell and the Doom Hunter, but there are a lot of really good enemy designs across the game.
Yeah. What did you two think of? What was it called? The summoner? Whatever the summoner type enemy was. Like, what did you two think of that enemy?
Yeah.
That enemy I didn't
like them.
But I don't think it's necessarily bad design in the way that the Doom Hunter or the Marauder were, but that enemy still drove me nuts.
I think it has a similar problem to those that, like, when they appeared, I feel like that was the only thing I could focus on, because if you don't kill them before they summon in things, it just makes it way harder. But they didn't drive me as crazy as the Doom Hunter and Marauder did.
Yeah, my solution for the summoner was usually to use one of the super weapons on it, because, which, by the way, the Marauder is immune to super weapons.
Yeah, that's another really dumb thing.
Yeah.
It's not immune to the gosh damn command prompt.
The ultimate super weapon.
The ultimate weapon.
But the summoner comes so late game that you have super weapons by then. So like that was usually what I just saved my super ammo for.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't like the summoner, but also it was almost a sigh of relief for me. It's like, oh, good, the hard one's the summoner and not another friggin' Marauder. Right. You know, like, so like, yes, it's something that required more attention than what I thought the game allowed me to give it. But at the same time, boy, this is way better than what it could be, because the game has shown me what it could be, and that's me just cheating my way through it. You know. Anyway.
Yeah, when I think about looking at a list here of just like the normal heavy class of demons,
it's called
like
the Archvile, by the way, the summoner.
Yeah, the Archvile, the Arachnotron, the spider guy, the Keko demons, like the Hell Knights, the Mancubus, the Pinky, the Prowler, Revenants, like all of those are fun to fight.
Yeah, those are all fun.
And most of them were in Doom 2016.
That's also exactly right.
Exactly.
Yeah, they added a lot more enemies. I feel like some of the new ones were fine, like the Cacodemon spinoff. What's it called? The Pain Elemental, I think.
Yeah, the Pain Elemental.
Like that one was fine.
That was from Doom 2, right? Yeah. I mean, like that was
a lot of the Archvile was also from Doom 2. I think a lot of the new enemies they added were from Doom 2.
I mean, this is basically just Doom 2 in a 3D environment. Like that's pretty much what they did.
The subtitle for the original Doom 2 was Hell on Earth.
Right.
Yeah.
It was when the Hell Demons came to Earth, which is what
they just did it again.
Yeah.
By the way, here's a space castle, just like Unreal Tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for the encounter design, like when they just gave me a selection of like those standard heavies and fodder enemies, I generally had a pretty good time.
Yeah.
But when they started throwing in some of those ones we've talked a lot about that just create problems and interrupt the normal flow is when I felt these weird spikes of difficulty that I didn't like, or the time challenges like we talked about.
Yeah, and my real memory of like my enjoyment of this game came in 3 acts. The game was, I think, 12-ish chapters.
Yeah.
And it was basically about 3 equal acts of like the first third of the game was what we talked about earlier, of just feeling like they didn't ramp you into it appropriately, and it was like trying to wrap my head around the systems, and just nothing felt great for those first 3 or 4 missions. But by the time I was about 4 missions in, I felt like I kind of wrapped my head around it. And that middle third of the game, I actually really enjoyed. And I felt like that was the chunk of the game where I had kind of wrapped my head, I had wrapped my head around the systems well enough where, most encounters I could hit the timings well enough, and most of the enemies you were fighting were kind of the level of enemies that Nate's talking about. It was those like, they hadn't really gotten to where marauders were standard enemies yet, or the archvile, or all that stuff. And it was like, so a lot of the regular encounters in that middle third of the game to me felt really good, and that was by far my favorite part of the game. And I felt like, and I really enjoyed that section. And then the back third of the game is what we've just been talking about, is where they started having marauders and doom hunters and archviles, and they started having all those just really ridiculous enemies in every single encounter. And like, I remember the last 2 or 3 missions in particular just being such an intense combat slog of those kind of enemies constantly.
Yeah, and that actually maps on almost exactly to my feelings. The first third of the game was really difficult for me to get on board with all the stuff that they wanted me to do. The middle third was, wow, this is where I'm having a lot of fun. And then that back third was like, you friggin' what, mate? Like that maps on almost exactly to my gameplay experience too. So like, at least I wasn't alone in the frustrations, and then the fun times, and then the frustrations again. Like,
and it was like different frustrations at the beginning and the end too. It was
because like by the end, it's like, no, listen, I finally figured out how you wanted me to play the game. Like, I got it. Like, I know what you want me to do.
And then they throw in the marauder that breaks everything you learned.
Like, what do you mean that you're going to give me an enemy type that none of my previous lessons work for? Like, this is
immune to the BFG for some reason.
For no good reason.
Yeah, I mean, at least make him not immune to that, like, or at least allow me to shoot rockets behind him, and those rockets damage him. Not that his shield is actually a 360-degree effing force field. Like, no, this isn't fun anymore.
Yeah.
So
the last thing that I feel like I would need to address to feel like I fully talked about this game before we wrap up is the progression systems.
Yeah. That was I jotted a few things down. That was the one thing left.
Yep.
I jotted down a list again of all the progression systems in this game.
All right.
So most of the weapons have weapon mods that you collect and equip throughout the game, which add a different alternate fire to it. Most weapons have 2 of those. Mm-hmm. Then you also get weapon tokens that you spend to upgrade the weapon mods. Once you've unlocked all the upgrades for a weapon mod, you can get the mastery challenge for that weapon by doing something like getting 100 headshots or something really silly and grindy.
Right.
There are Praetor suit tokens that you can get to upgrade in 5 different categories for your suit: environmental, exploration, fundamentals, ice grenade, and frag grenade. There are runes, which there are 9 of, and you can equip 3 at a time that you unlock throughout the game. The sentinel crystals, which you use to get either just straight bonus, or you get straight bonuses to either health, armor, or ammo each time you get one. And then when you get certain pairs of those, you get other unique upgrades to your, usually your blood punch or your flame belch. And then there are sentinel batteries that you find throughout levels that you use to unlock locked doors in the hub area to get all the things aforementioned. And then there are also level-based challenges, so each mission has its own set of challenges to try to do during the mission.
Yep.
I hate these progression systems so much.
And again, listeners, if you are exhausted by all of the stuff that Nate just said, we are as well.
So some of those things I like. I mean, Doom 2016 had probably half of those progression things, like the runes were in 2016.
I think if you have this, it's fine, right?
Yeah. I mean, Doom 2016 actually probably had almost all of those, but it's how does all this stuff fit in with the core systems? Because like Doom 2016 had mission challenges and I think weapon challenges too. But when you're trying to complete those challenges on top of everything else, all the other systems this game has, it's an extra thing to think. Like you're really, when you put it all together, you're having to think about a billion things at once when you're playing this game, and it's just a lot to think about. Otherwise, some of the upgrades are just kind of silly. It's like, why do we need batteries to go back to the hub to unlock something? Just give us the thing in the first place.
Yeah, some of them are just frivolous like that, and then some of them, like, I felt like the Predator suit upgrades are just not, like, I thought the fundamentals and the frag grenade paths were good, but I basically didn't care about the other 3/5 of the suit upgrades.
Yeah. The first suit upgrade I got was the one that reveals all the collectibles on your map.
See, I thought about doing those ones, but like I wasn't having trouble finding anything, so I actually got those last.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
You are right that I got about half the suit upgrades, and there were some that I thought were useful. I mean, like being able to fire 2 frag grenades, I think, before a cooldown was one of them, and it's like, that's good.
The frag grenade ones were all good.
Yeah, and there were some like more survivability things. There was one that was like you're immune to explosive barrels or something. It's like, that's just good to have. So like, I got about half of them. I thought they were good, and then you're right, like the back portion of the game, it was like, I don't really care about any of these.
Yeah, they didn't feel useful to me, and then like most of the runes I didn't care about, and also the way you unlock runes I thought was really strange.
Yeah, you'll get the 3 you like, and then you're done.
Yeah, it shows you all 9 of them, and you get to pick each time you get a new room which one you're going to get. So you're going to get the 3 you want first, and then unlock 6 runes that you're not going to use.
Yeah, and that's the exact same thing that I did. It's like, all right, well, I've got my 3. And it's like, hey, bud, you got this. And I'm like, cool, get me out of here. Like, just get me out of this menu. No, thank you. I'm
Which
good.
I did
So-
switch
it's so
those
strange.
around a little bit, because the one that makes glory kills faster, normally I wouldn't use, but then when you're on the timed challenges, I would always put that one on so that I could get through it quicker.
Yeah,
So like,
that's like the one situation that it's worth changing them around for.
which is a frustrating use of that, but still.
Well, and I was going to say, like, I did not do that. That's a great idea. I should have done that. But somehow that makes me irrationally angry, and I don't quite know where that comes from. It's like, of course you should change your runes depending on what you're doing, but at the same time, like, I've got my 3. I don't need these 9. I don't want to change them. This is ridiculous. And
And I think that's what they wanted, because some of them are like, there's one that like when you aim down sights, you like hover in the air, and like some arenas are going to be really advantageous for that. And then there are other ones that like give you benefits after flaming. So like if there's a lot of enemies to flame, it's going to be. So I think they intend you to switch them around based on the situation, but I just don't think that's how most players are going to play Doom.
Not at all.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that not all of the progression systems are bad, and some of them are perfectly fine. I just think, there's too many of them, and a decent number of them are just sloppy and don't feel great, especially after the first few things you get in each of them. Like, for the most part, I got the weapon mods I wanted, and then unlocked the second weapon mod for the weapon and never used it.
Yeah. Did you still? So I was completionist and I completed everything. So I would.
I did still complete everything, but
yeah. So I'd switch to the second weapon mod and try and do its challenges.
yeah,
But yeah, like I agree that I'd pretty much in every case, I think I picked the one I liked better first. There might have been 1 or 2 weapons where it was like, oh, I don't know which of these I like better.
Yeah.
And just kind of guessed. But generally speaking, it's like, yeah, the first one I picked was the one I really wanted.
Yeah.
The weirdest weapon mod to me was the machine gun. I forget what it's called. It's one of the first weapons you get. And one of the weapon mods is a like zoom in scope shot.
Yep.
And the other weapon mod is the micro missiles. And like at least 2 or 3 of the enemies, when they describe you the weak point, they just like the video that explains the weak point is showing you zooming in with that weapon mod, and it's like,
Yeah.
you kind of need this weapon mod. Like,
Which I picked the micro missiles first
mhm.
because I was like, oh, damage output, sure. And then I keep getting all these tooltips showing them using the
Yeah.
scope shot with the assault rifle, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I'll get
Well,
that at some point, I guess.
Yeah.
right, and like that's actually something because I actually went back and I played a bit of Doom 2016, and the micro missiles in Doom 2016 are amazing. Because it's
Yeah.
like, dude, you can just empty out your whole clip in 5 seconds, and you've got all this other ammo type with all this other ammo, and you can just like totally just like waste down a singular enemy that's going to cause you trouble in this encounter. And instead, in Doom 2020, what you get is, hey, that's cool micro missiles. That's not going to hit weak points. And by the way, that Marauder has a shield, and this other guy has another shield, and your micro missiles aren't strong against that. So it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
it, come on.
Doom 2016 felt like it had a lot more. It gave you a lot more flexibility in how you tackled challenges, and it led to this thing. I think, like, we've griped about a lot of things, but I think other than maybe just the overload of things you had to pay attention to, the thing that probably bums me out the most of this game is the net effect all of that has of, like, when I get a new tool. When I got a new weapon in Doom 2016, it's like, ooh, this is another option for me to kill demons with. Like, this is another tool in my tool belt. This is another thing I can be flexible with and, have at my disposal. And in Doom Eternal, when I got a new weapon, it was like, all right, this is another thing they're going to require me to use in specific ways at specific times, and it's adding another layer of complexity to the already overwhelming combat puzzle, so to speak. And it made new weapons and new mods and stuff not as exciting as a result.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, and that really does drive it home, is that you were excited to get something new when you were playing Doom 2016. Because you're like, oh man, what can I do with this? Whereas in Doom 2020, they're like, hey, here you go. And then you're like, well, shit, I'm having a hard enough time juggling these other 10 things. They gave me thing number 11, and you're not excited the same way. Like, it's not one of those, like, oh man, how can I murder demons in new and gruesome ways? It's more like well, shit, how are they going to change the encounter design and make this way harder? Because now I have an 11th tool to deal with, and that's not pleasant. You know what I mean? And like, it shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel like you're getting layered complexity and just added stress by being given a new tool. And that is one of the things that I also share, that feeling is like every time they gave me something new, I was like, holy crap, all right, well, how do I figure how this works with my other stuff? Like, and that's not a great feeling to have.
Yeah. The game just feels very, and this is the point we keep coming back to, it feels very rigid, and like you have to use things specifically, you have to hit your timings, like use everything a certain way. It's almost like combat by like they call it a combat puzzle, but I almost feel like it's more of like combat by numbers type of thing. It's like you're filling in the pre-prescribed sequence of things you need to do. Which is frustrating because, like I said, shooting that shotgun feels good. Like, when this game is clicking, it's still really good. Like, overall, I mean, the way we've been talking, it's probably obvious by now. Like, I like Doom 16 a whole lot Doom 2016 a whole lot better than
we
this
all
game.
do.
But when this game, when it hits its moments, when you get into a good encounter and you're doing your thing, it still feels really good, and it's fairly comparable to Doom 2016.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I guess we're coming near the end of this deep dive, but like, I think we can all agree that we really enjoyed Doom 2016, right? I know for me personally, I enjoyed Doom 2016 like a whole lot. Like that game's like a 9 out of 10 for me. It's not Like, I don't know that I would put it in my top 10 of all video games of all time, but it's also like if I sat down and really made that list, it might be up there. Like, it was a really, really good video game. Um, Doom 20 or Doom Eternal was one of those games that I played it, I finished it, I command console through part of it. Um, it might be one of my least liked video games that I actually finish. And I know that that sounds harsh, but that's just like I said, I finished it out of spite. You know, like I saw these glimpses of all of these things that I could see that they were trying to do, and it's just like you say, the dudes who wrote the story didn't have an editor. The guys that did the gameplay didn't have an editor. Like, these bosses should not have appeared again in the ways that they did. Um, so I know that I'm being fairly harsh about it, but at the same time, you know, when it comes down to it, like, I would I would not tell my past self that it's a waste of time to play through it, but I would tell my past self, dude, your expectations are way too high walking into this. Like, it's not going to be what you want it to be. You're not going to feel cool. You're not going to enjoy the soundtrack. You're going to slog through it. You're going to enjoy that middle third of the game. And I know that's harsh, but that's kind of where I fall. Like, it's right there on the border of I should have just stopped playing it because I wasn't having fun with it. Um, so as harsh as I am with it, you know, like Nate, we'll start with you. Um, like how close were you to being like, I'm gonna put this down versus, hey, this was a great thing I enjoyed all the way through? Because we've all had complaints, but
Yeah,
like I feel like I'm probably the most negative here of the three of
probably.
us. So like in between, you know, where I am with where you fell, you know, like what's your takeaway for? I played this game, I did these things. How do you feel about it out the other end?
I generally enjoyed my time with it, even though I was constantly frustrated by something with the game. There was never a time where I wasn't frustrated by anything in this game, but generally I was able to enjoy it pretty well um, when the encounters felt like dynamic and fun as much as they can in the systems we've described. Um, it is definitely the later section of the game where I struggled the most to enjoy it, and like I've talked about, difficulty spikes in certain enemy types and the time challenges. So it was definitely a lot of up and down for me. I overall came away generally enjoying it, but with like huge asterisks next to that of like there's not a system in this game that I don't have problems with, and there are tons of encounters that I didn't enjoy, but there were more encounters that I did enjoy because I got into a rhythm with the normal enemies, what I think of as the more normal enemies, and enjoyed fighting them with the tools that I was given once I got my head around it.
Gotcha. So, Lex, what about you? Like, what are your thoughts for your time with Doom Eternal?
Yeah, I'm probably fairly similar to Nate overall. It's funny because this is a weird game to like evaluate because it's coming from Doom 2016 and a game that I really really like. It's possibly my favorite first person shooter campaign ever. It's in the conversation at least.
Yep.
There's obviously a lot of expectations, and I think Doom Eternal has a lot of easy things to nitpick. Like, basically everything it does different from Doom 2016, I think made it worse. And it's easy to nitpick at all of those changes as a negative. And it's definitely, I clearly like it much less than Doom 2016. But there's, as Nate said, like a lot of the quote unquote normal encounters are still very fun. Like a lot of the core Doom gunplay is still very fun. I think where a lot of the frustrations come from, in addition to just very questionable design decisions and some of those things, like this is not the direction I wanted them to go with this. And as we've discussed ad nauseum, like a lot of them just don't make sense. But I think where it makes it even tougher is like we all wanted this game to be, we all wanted to love this game. We all loved Doom 2016, and we wanted to love this game as well. And I think that makes it feel harsher. Is like once you get a couple missions in and you're just like overwhelmed by everything going on, you're like, what is this game? Like, what did they do to Doom? And it's a little bit of a shell shock.
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
And I kind of have to reel myself back from those expectations and what I want Doom to be, and try and evaluate the game for what it is instead. And I think on that front, like I still enjoyed it overall. I still, as Nate said, the regular encounters, when they hit, they're fun. And I think more often than not, that was the case. And I'm glad I played it. I definitely enjoyed it. Like there's some fun stuff in there. Like the weapons are still fun. Like a lot of the normal enemies are fun to fight. Like I think a lot of the combat rooms are big and fun. And we probably did not spend enough proportional time in this podcast talking about that stuff. But at the same time, all of the good stuff in this game is what Doom 2016 did. Yeah. And that's been talked about for years now. So like you kind of know that stuff.
Yep.
So I guess to wrap it up, like this game still has good Doom stuff in it. The same good Doom stuff Doom 2016 had. It's just, as a Doom 2016 fan, the changes it made are not where I wanted it to go, and leave an odd sour taste that bums me out in a way.
Yeah. And the one thing that we didn't talk about that I'm just gonna shout out real quickly because it kind of happened and then went away was Doom Eternal added the de novo DRM after release. Mm-hmm. And that caused a lot of consternation in various tech circles. And actually, whenever you dig into it, it doesn't give you a warm and fuzzy feeling.
Well, I think Nate experienced that firsthand. So So Paul and I finished the game before that got added in.
That's correct.
Nate did not.
Nate, is there anything specifically that you wanted to talk about with that particular wrinkle into this story?
So I am probably one of the last people to pull out an internet pitchfork and ask for the heads of corporate people because they added something that is anti-cheat and might require a little bit more restrictive permissions or something. Like I just don't care. But when I started playing Doom, it wasn't in there. I played it for a couple days. I had to step away from the game for about a week because our second daughter was born, and when I came back, they had put the de novo anti-cheat stuff in, and when I tried to play it, I literally couldn't get the game to play with my antivirus software that was installed on my computer. I had to turn off my antivirus completely to get the game to run. And then even after that point, I noticed that the game ran significantly worse for me for whatever reason. And, you know, who knows? Maybe it's not all because of the anti-cheat stuff, but I definitely had to like drop down my graphical settings to make the game look worse just to get it playable for a couple of days, and then stepped away from it again, I think, until they said they were removing it. Right. And then when I came back, it ran fine again.
And did you bump the settings back up again?
Uh-huh.
Yep. Wow. So what ends up happening is when they add de novo in, it actually bogs down your CPU quite a bit. And then that makes you have to bump down your graphics, like Nate's talking about. Well, then, because of the outcry, they removed it.
Yeah.
Well, see, like again, there's a lot of things to get pitchforks about, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. But when I bought Doom Eternal, Denuvo was not part of that calculus.
Yeah, same for me.
Right, and for them to add it unilaterally after the fact, as soon as I saw that it was added, because I had already finished the campaign, I just straight up uninstalled the game. Like I didn't agree to that, and
Yeah.
you know maybe that's me picking a hill to die on, but still, like there's enough stuff around the corporate decisions for this game that it doesn't feel great. You know, like it just doesn't. I'm not gonna say it's the worst thing in the world, because have you seen the world? There's a lot of bad things out there.
Yeah.
If it feels silly to talk about an anti-cheat engine, given a global pandemic plus other things. Which, if you're viewing this video in 2025, 2020 was a mess. Hopefully, it gets better from here. But
No one's
you
gonna
know,
be
like,
alive in 2025, Paul. Don't worry.
oh yeah, you're right. Everyone's dead by then. Sorry, I totally missed that memo. But you know, like this is stuff that's like, okay, you know, maybe we don't feel great about some of the gameplay decisions. Maybe we've got complaints. Maybe we do feel like we're being negative. But then, whenever you add on top of that a business decision that makes someone like Nate over here have to turn his game quality settings down to play the game because of something that they added after the fact.
And it still wasn't good. Like I turned on the FPS counter on while that was all going on to try to figure out what I could do to make it run better, and it would still, if it was in an outdoor environment during a firefight, it would still regularly dip to 20.
So how much do you want to deal with 20 FPS while dealing with two marauders and a fucking
Yeah,
unbalanced
right.
encounter?
Doom's kind of, I would think, unplayable at 20 frames per second.
It was not good, and that's why like I wasn't close to quitting this game at any point because of game design decisions, but that was the one point where I was like, maybe I just shouldn't play this anymore.
No, and I mean, for as high as we were on Doom 2016, like, it's almost unconscionable that hey, let's just abandon this halfway through. I mean, like, that just seems so far of a fall, in lack of better words.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a different issue because I would guess, I have no inside baseball here. I would guess the developers didn't make that decision. That was probably outside of their control. So like the game they're designing and they want to make is what we've been mostly talking about.
And at least they did take it out for whatever little that's worth. They did take it out.
Right.
But I think that pretty much covers everything for Doom Eternal.
Yeah, and
it's a good place to call it.
It's a good place to call it. You know, like there's definitely been some negativity here. There's also some positive stuff. This is a game that I think that all of us felt very strongly about, right? Like we weren't super excited about Doom 2016, and then it came out, and we're like, oh, look at this. And then we played it, and I mean, like it was in Game of the Year sort of conversation. So then we were really excited about Doom Eternal, and then it came out, and it's like, holy moly, this is a complete
opposite trajectory of. It's like expectations for Doom 2016 were down here. The actual game was up here. And expectations for Doom Eternal were up here, and the actual game was down here. And it's like, you know. Right. They probably aren't as different as we're making it out to be. They're definitely different, but like the expectations make it feel way different.
The expectations make it feel way different. So anyway, we hope that you guys out there who are listening have enjoyed our ATACS deep dive. Our intent moving forward is to do more of these deep dives into various video games that we have played. So if you would stay tuned to the channel, you'll see more of our very incredible faces, bearded and not, chops and not, hair and not. Also, there will be cats. We all have cats. Actually, Flex, do you have cats?
Nope.
You should get cats. Anyway, so you'll see us more on this channel. I don't know what
This
we're going to
plays
talk
really
about
well
next.
on the audio only version.
Yes.
Yes, it totally does. And if you're listening to the audio only, congratulations. We're now a video podcast, like every other podcast. So we're going to talk amongst ourselves, figure out what to talk about next. But expect more of these deep dives. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yep.
Should be fun.
Yeah.
We can talk about
Oh.
very anime video games that start with final and end with fantasy.
Love the anime, and I can't wait to talk about both the last and the fantasy. So anyway, I have been your host. I am Paul from Atlanta.